Undoubtedly, motorcycles have become increasingly complex and techy, and it's gotta be said, it's not for everyone. I know from the comments on our videos that some bikers prefer the least amount of intervention possible, and understandably would rather not pay for all those gadgets and rider aids that they've absolutely no intention of using. Even at the more affordable end of the market, bikes are now shipping with TFT displays, phone connectivity, multiple rider modes and quick shifters. And so if you are a fan of the simple, then it might seem like there aren't really many options left.
Well, perhaps there is an antidote, and it could be this. The CCM Street Moto R, which is the latest in their line of custom-looking big singles that are hand-built here in the UK, with one clear aim: to put all of the emphasis on the purest possible riding experience. So does it actually make for a better ride, or am I so used to testing bikes nowadays with all the latest bells and whistles that this one feels a bit archaic, especially considering the 11.5 grand price tag? Well, I guess we better take it for a spin to find out.
Before we get into it, a massive thanks to DJI for supporting the channel and making videos like this one possible. For all the riding footage you'll see in this video, we're using their Osmo Action 5 Pro and Osmo Action 4, both of which we wholeheartedly recommend for shooting and sharing your rides. So if you're looking for the perfect way to document your motorcycle escapades, then there are links down in the description below to both cameras where you can find out more.
So let's start with the engine, and it's a 600cc liquid-cooled single cylinder, and it makes around 55 horsepower and 50 Nm of peak torque. Now it doesn't sound like a lot, but it really is quite direct. There's no rider aids or riding modes to nanny out the power, just a simple cable throttle, and that's pretty much it.
One thing that really helps to make it feel enough though is the weight, or the lack thereof. You see, the dry weight figure for this bike is pretty ridiculous at just 134 kilograms for this R model, which is actually 2 kilograms less than the standard Street Moto, thanks to some fancy bits like the Dimag wheels. It's easily lithe enough to mean that the 55 horsepower feels pretty good, and it does thrust forward on the throttle with that uninterrupted connection that you get with an old school cable. Then I will also say there's a real sensation of speed too. It vibes a lot, especially if you hold on to the gears, and that's probably because there's not much in the way of rubber mounts or inserts or seat padding either. And then these bikes aren't actually homologated, and they just get them individually type approved on a bike-by-bike basis for road use here in the UK. That means there isn't the typical restrictive exhaust system that you generally find on modern day mass-produced bikes. And so when you get on the throttle, it has that typical big thumper sound, but it's extra loud, extra bassy, and combined with the vibes does help to add a bit of drama. Thing is though, this bike doesn't just go in a straight line well, with plenty more enjoyment to be found through turns, and I think, again, a lot of that comes back to the stripped back featherweight build.
That means it just feels ludicrously agile, and it never really wants to go off in a direction that you don't want it to. And I think that's also aided by the suspension. So you've got an adjustable Marzocchi upside down fork, and on this R model you also get a slightly upgraded YSS shock. Generally I'd say it feels quite firm, as you'd probably expect from a fairly sporty bike that doesn't have a lot of weight to it. But of course you've got a little bit of adjustability either way, and it sort of suits the character of this bike to be sharp and taut and composed, and it really does corner fantastically.
Definitely those Dimag wheels that we mentioned earlier help as well, with a bit less rotating and unsprung mass as opposed to the spoke trims on the non-R model. I will say as well, I'm also pretty impressed with the braking. Up front you've got a radially mounted 4-pot caliper from J1 on a single wavy disc, and I found it to be plenty enough power through the lever stroke if there isn't necessarily that much initial bite. Still, with this bike you've got no ABS, which is quite rare for 2024, and so perhaps a fairly gradual initial delivery of braking power rather than something really grabby might actually be preferable. Plus, the lack of ABS hardware probably helps to give it that nice, precise feel as you really start to squeeze them on.
As for the ergonomics, well, the thing that I'd say it's most similar to is something like a Supermoto, as you probably expect from a 600cc single. The bars, for example, are high and wide and the foot pegs low and chunky, and while at 830mm it's not necessarily as tall in the seat as a Supermoto, it does have that slim, slender saddle that gives you that sense of agility on the bike. Plus, from a practical perspective, it does mean a narrow standover, which does make it easy to get both feet down, and combined with the minimal amount of mass to the bike, well, it's an absolute doddle to get on with. Now look, I'm not going to pretend that this is a particularly comfortable bike for big days in the saddle. It's thin on the seat, like I say, there's plenty of vibes as well, but ultimately it feels like it's set up for exactly what this bike is made for, which is those short, sharp, aggressive rides where you want to feel really connected to the bike, and it absolutely does that.
On the tech front, well, this section will be pretty brief, and like I say, for a lot of people, I think that actually might be part of the appeal of a bike like this. There are no riding modes, no rider aids, no connectivity, no menus, just a simple LCD dash, and I must admit, it's quite refreshing when you hop on a bike like this nowadays. Still, I like the LED lighting and the fact that the front indicators are always on as position lights. The integrated lighting at the rear end looks pretty clean too. And there's also an electronic fob for the ignition, which you just tap on the side there. And then you've got a really cool looking start and kill button that are built into the billet dash surround. For me, it just helps to give it a bit of a feel of a custom bike, which does suit the personality and image of the rest of it. In fact,
on the styling front, well, I think all of the CCMs are very distinctive and nice looking, and like there's a lot of attention to detail gone into them. And although I do think the bigger flat track and bobber style wheels on some of the other models kind of suit the overall dimensions better, I will say this is realistically going to be the most fun to ride, and so it's a little bit of a trade-off that I'd be willing to make. Specifically for this R model, you've got the yellow paint job, which really does pop. And I think one of the nicest things about it is the fact that you get lots of little billet parts here and there. So stuff like the instruments around, the headlight bracket, and I believe there's more you can spec up in the accessories catalogue. And then I'm also enjoying some of the carbon bits on this R model, like up here, down on the mudguard. Under the engine with the sump guards, you've got the heat shields on the exhaust, and there's plenty at the back as well, so it's basically dripping in it.
I think on the whole it's a really interesting looking bike, and I think all the better for it, but I'd love to know what you make of it in the comments and whether you'd consider buying a bike that looked like this. But anyway, with all of that in mind, you know, is this simplistic approach to building a bike a good thing? And should you consider buying one of these if you're looking for something that delivers that unfiltered riding experience?
Well, I guess the thing that might just make you stop and think a bit is the price. With the standard bike costing £9,995 and this up-spec'd R model coming in at £11,495. That opens up so many options in the mass-produced naked world, a lot of which have more power, more tech, and more versatility and comfort.
And yes, I'd definitely say if you're looking for something for the daily commute, and also with some of the latest gadgets, then there are certainly going to be better ways to spend this kind of money. But my guess is they won't be as interesting looking as this, and they won't have bits of billet aluminium and carbon. They also probably won't be as lightweight, and there's very little chance that they'll be hand built in the UK, which I think is worth something to some potential customers anyway. But I think more than any of that, they won't be as simple and immersive, and while it might seem a little counterintuitive to pay a bit more for something with less, well, sometimes less is more.
As always though, I'd love to know what you reckon to this bike down in the comments. And if you want to see a selection of our other favourite new naked bikes for 2025, then I'll put our list on the screen now so you can give it a click and give it a watch if you haven't already. Do hit subscribe as well to see more of the latest motorcycle reviews like this right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll catch you in the next one.